the social hall is open. God, that means so much to me. That was just a space. What did they do with the children? That's where they
Thank you, Robin. Oh, welcome back. Yay! Welcome back. And good morning. Some of you are probably happy that it's almost afternoon because we are gathered at 11 o'clock here at this historic and wonderful community we call Fountain Street Church. I'm Reverend Christopher Rowe. I use he, him pronouns, and I, in this season, have the responsibility of serving as your acting senior minister. Here, where love and justice and equity and inclusion are the shared work of this community's faith. It's a huge responsibility and a tremendous gift to share in this ministry with all of you. So this is our first Sunday back after a summer away from one another, and it is so good to see your faces. Speaking of faces, I want to make sure that you get to know a few of them better. So I want to invite our staff up to the steps. We at Fountain Street Church are richly blessed with a talented and gifted and loving staff. All the way down on the end is Margie Peterson, who is not only our choir accompanist, but now our chaplain, which is an exciting moment in our church's history. So thank you, Margie, so much. And for his second church season with us, I am so honored to welcome back Austin. Thank you, our choir director. Holy smokes, right next to Austin, we have Melissa Jose, our general manager of operations, through whom and with whom everything gets done. Right next to her, we have Shannon, who's one of the wonderful and loving faces who keep this building running and going and clean and wonderful and hospitable. Thank you, Shannon. We love having you here. And then we have Lori. Lori is our office manager and one of the greatest assets we have welcomed in a very long time. Get to know Lori. And of course, we welcome back Lydia Stubbs, who is the Director of Children and Youth Programs, devoutly devoted to Fountain Street Church and to children, youth, and their families. Thank you, Lydia. Another face that not everybody gets to see because he's usually here on off hours is Darius. Darius is also, like Shannon, one of the wonderful folks who keep this building as hospitable as it can be. Thank you and welcome, Darius. And of course, Jamie, who's our head custodian, and not only does he make this place hospitable, he keeps it fun. So I love Jamie. Behind the scenes, because they can't abandon their post, we have a whole slate of tech and AV folks who make these services possible and reachable and inclusive from home. So those of you who are watching from home, a special debt of gratitude to them. They are wonderful and we are blessed with them, as well as our nursery staff who are upstairs offering childcare. They couldn't leave those children unattended, we'll say. So we thank them for their service too. And finally, thank you so much, staff. I also want to lift up our organist, Jonathan Took, who unfortunately is in the hospital right now, so we will pray for him. He's not able to be with us after all this morning, but we are grateful for his gifts and ministry. So welcome back. We have a wonderful service ready for you this morning. You were likely given an order of service or a program or a bulletin, whatever your vernacular is, and I invite you to follow along in that. One of the ways in which I hope that we can, in the 11 o'clock service, become more of a grounded and reverential experience of worship is that I will probably be doing less emceeing of the elements, and we will allow the whole corpus of the service to just flow. So there will always be generous introductions to our hymns, and chances are if you hear the organ cue in, you can take a peek and make sure you're not missing what that hymn is. There are going to be other elements that you'll be invited into, but it's just a new way of kind of orienting ourselves to worship in the 11 o'clock service. It is truly special to be with all of you. And so as we continue this worship with one another, I want to invite you to hear our invitation to worship and our invitation to this new church year. called Blessing in the Chaos by Jan Richardson. Hear these words as a balm to your soul and allow them to invite all of us into this space together. To all that is chaotic within you, let there come silence. Let there be a calming of the clamoring within, a stilling of the voices that have laid their claim on you, that have made their home inside of you, that go with you even into the holy places like this one. The voices that will not let you rest. The voices that will not let you hear the wholeness that is already inside of you or feel the grace that has fashioned you into who you are. Let what distracts you cease. Let what divides you cease. Let there come an end to what diminishes and demeans, and let all of these things depart from you so you may leave its cage. Let there be an opening into the quiet that lies beneath the chaos, where you might find peace in the places you didn't think were possible, and where you might see shimmers, even in the midst of the storm. Welcome to this new season of worship together, and welcome to Fountain Street Church.
Good morning. My name is Margie Peterson. I use she, her pronouns, but if you call me by something else, I'll still answer. And I will be reading this morning's selected readings. Our ancient witness this morning comes to us from the Rumi poem, The Guest House, translated by Coleman Barks. Hear what the ancient spirit is saying to our contemporary souls this morning. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Our contemporary witness comes to us from Christine McDougall's poem, Liminal. Hear what the contemporary spirit is saying to us this morning. Liminal, on the threshold, the space between where questions tug. And the next step is not yet formed, but forming. It is a place for holding, being, seeking. Urgency is forbidden. The liminal space has its own gestation and requires patience, dreaming, and conversation. Intimate, loving conversation with self, the world, and others, to nurture maturing. The liminal is a place of grace. You are held by its tender embrace. To struggle against it prolongs the journey. Relax. Breathe. Sooner or later, the next page will be turned and all will be revealed. The path forward will become evident in its time. In its time.
As our choir makes their way to the steps, I have one more announcement and invitation. It's funny because this is my 5th Welcome Back Sunday with y'all, and in my first year, I was the minister for education. So on that very first Sunday, we had the children invited into this beautiful Cathedral of Love, and Fred Wooden, our senior minister at the time, and Marilyn Osenchuk, our organist, and I, the education minister, never actually invited the children to go to character school. Here we are 5 years later. And so I want to make that invitation to the youngest among us, or those who seek to go to character school for that kind of worship experience. You're invited to go during this time. Your parents can take you up to the 2nd floor, and there's some folks who will help you on the way. Thank you.
Song of our first lamentation.
Thank you, choir. Will you breathe with me? Okay. Back in May of this year, our community of faith came together and we voted to elect 9 of our peers to the devout service of finding and nominating a candidate to be called as the next senior minister of this church we love. After the votes were counted and the results had been certified, we learned that Chip Wall, Marie Penny, Natalie Beversluis, Judy Botts, Paul Arnold, Carol Townsend, Angie Walters, Kathleen Higgins, and Andrea Heidel, who would later be replaced by Mary Peterson, would be the ones tasked and entrusted with a monumental role in stewardship of our church's future. We owe a great deal of gratitude to all of them as they surrendered not only their time and their capacity and their energy, but also their ego and their personal desires so that they could shed themselves of their presuppositions and dutifully discern what exactly this church wanted and needed next for its future. About a month into their work together, I was invited into a conversation with the committee in which we discussed the best practices from denominations like the United Church of Christ, the American Baptist Churches, and of course the Unitarian Universalist Association. And one of the practices that we discerned together was that if and when an internal candidate might be present, the committee should first discern whether or not they should consider them. And if not, how to proceed with healthy boundaries and realistic expectations moving forward. Throughout our conversations with one another, I wholeheartedly agree with them that it would behoove us to follow those guidelines from our denominational friends. And as such, I also expressed to them that I'd be open to continuing our conversations with one another. The Governing Board, Senior Minister Search Committee, and I had all been the recipients of your generous endorsements. And as a result, the Senior Minister Search Committee let me know that I was the only candidate that they were considering, and I was both humbled and honored. After all, thank you. Because after all, I love Fountain Street Church. I love the people, you, and those of you at home, who call this their home. I love the history here that propels us into the future. I love the commitments to justice, equity, and inclusion. I love the openness to places and spaces that we've yet to even imagine together. I love the ways in which I have grown with you, and I love the ways in which you've grown with me. I love the ways that we have seen some deeply challenging moments together, and I love the ways in which we have covenanted to growing from those very challenges. I love that on more than one occasion I've stood before you with sweaty palms and a pounding chest to share words that felt impossibly difficult to share with you. And I love that on more than one occasion, you have demonstrated with me the capacity and compassion to receive those words. So it's with that spirit of unconditional love and that same spirit of great reverence for this church that I need to have a difficult conversation with you this morning. Because I've decided to share with the Senior Minister Search Committee, the Governing Board, and with you, that I don't think this is an appropriate time to call me as your senior minister. And moreover, as one of the lead stewards of this institution, who also stewards with you your mission, your vision, your values, and even your ideas for the future, I do not believe this is the appropriate time for us to call anyone else to be our senior minister either. This decision wasn't with an unimaginable amount of grief, profound turmoil, and endless self-doubt, because this has been, in fact, the hardest sermon to ever write. Secretly and not so secretly, serving at Fountain Street Church in any capacity has been my dream for the better part of my adulthood and the entirety of my ministry. Let alone imagining the opportunity to serve as this church's senior-most leader. But it would be disingenuous to my own ministry and to the shared ministry that we have been co-creating for 4 years now if I didn't acknowledge that calling me as your next senior minister right now, or anyone else for that matter, would be a distraction from the true work that still needs to be done in this church. This church has been through an astronomical amount of change, transition, and challenge for the better part of 2 decades. Even most recently, we've seen 11 staff members leave this church in just the 4 years that I've been here, with Greta being just 2 weeks ago. In different ways, but with mirrored consequences, Reverend Fred Wooden and Reverend Mariella left this church without true leave-takings or official goodbyes, leaving our church with gaping holes in our hearts that I know still exist to this day. The pandemic pulled us apart from one another for 18 months, and when we did finally return, many of the rhythms that felt normal were gone, and our normal modalities for connection and belonging were absent, and to some extent, many still are. We face unknown and possibly unimaginable financial liabilities insofar as this magnificent tower, or a broken elevator, or any of the other hallmarks of an aging building, not to mention a nimble and lean budget, smaller by the year. And we, along with communities of faith around the world, are swimming against the current of attendance loss and program participation without any guideposts for where to go next, because seemingly most other religious institutions in this century are trying to figure that out as well. The state of Fountain Street Church, a church I love, though full of potential and hope, is also laden with unresolved trauma and systematic work left to be done before this soil is fertile for a new, successful, and sustainable senior minister to join us all in mutual ministry. I'm certain that there are a few of you who are mortified right now, because this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel joyful or joy-filled, and it feels a little bit uncomfortable and a lot a bit awkward to openly talk about things that bring sadness. But the reality is, my friends, multiple truths can exist at once, and that is some good news for us this morning. It can be true that there can be and is a tremendous amount of systematic and organizational work that needs to be done at Fountain Street Church, and it can be true that there is a tremendous amount of possibility and opportunity waiting for the very same church. It can be true that entire policies, procedures, and patterns need to be deconstructed and dismantled within the operations of this church, and it can be true that this church is primed and prepped already to reconstruct and rebuild new policies, procedures, and patterns that could be among the most radically inclusive and equitable in church organizations in existence. It could be true, and it is true, that there is still unimaginable sadness, loss, and anger swimming throughout this community. And it can be true that that very same sadness and loss and anger is what might propel us to finally being a more loving, compassionate, and community-focused congregation. It can be true that right now I do not believe that it would be appropriate for me to be called as your next senior minister, or that we should be calling anyone else right now for that matter. And it can be true that we still have a lot of powerful and meaningful work left within us and in this season of liminality. And to that end, it can be true that I love you, that I love this church, and I love all that could be here. And it could be true that my conscience and my responsibilities as your minister will not allow me to lead us down a road that I don't think we're ready for. So, I do need you to know that I'm still committed to you and to us and this church. I am still committed to health and hope and collective flourishing. And I am still committed to the work that I believe needs to be done so that we can be liberated from the patterns and cycles that have not served this church and finally build towards a brighter, healthier, and more sustainable future together. In fact, my holy no in this moment is so that I can offer a sacred yes to something much bigger and a responsibility much broader for all of us than simply filling a vacant role and dropping acting off of my title. I stand before you this morning saying no to distracting us from what matters so that I can say yes with you to working on things that truly do. I'm saying yes to change and transformation. I'm saying yes to collective growth and liberation. I'm saying yes to restoration and renewal. I am saying yes to a kind of transformation from within that is ultimately so big, so powerful, so transformative, and so loving that it radiates within these walls and among these walls, but ultimately spills beyond these walls to a world that is desperately in need of social transformation as much as we are, just as much as we are. Okay, can I tell you a story? Back in the spring of 2010, if you can remember that far, I barely can, I had the opportunity to visit a camp in New Hampshire that my husband Jonathan had been working at. And it was a camp where they connected coastal city youth who were on the margins with natural wilderness therapy and outdoor adventure education. I distinctly remember getting to that camp in New Hampshire and being greeted by the camp director, and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad to meet you. You're in for such a special treat. The Beavers have started building a dam." Okay? I mean, I've seen a beaver dam before, and they're interesting. They're a little kooky, mounds of rubble rising up from a wetland. But so what? Sensing my reticent posture, she said, "You'll just have to trust me. It's rare to see the beginning of a process like this." So a few days later, the staff and the volunteers got to hike out to the newly constructed beaver dams. And the ground kept getting wetter, softer, mushier, muddier, until finally there was a slow current running over the path, which gave way to a few inches of standing water. And when I looked out across this farm field, it was only the tops of the crops that could peek above this newly forming lake before me. Now, the camp director had informed us and explained to us that the farmers in the area were working on getting the natural department resource manager there to dismantle the dams and mitigate the flooding. But beavers provide such fertile ecosystems and places of natural refuge and habitat regeneration that their appeals were not granted. You see, these tiny, ridiculous animals, mere rodents, mere blips in creation, were responsible for the co-creation of an entirely new ecosystem, and one of the most biodiverse and complex at that. A refuge for migrating birds, a sanctuary for endangered amphibians, a respite for new populations of mammals, a haven from overdeveloped land nearby, a harbor for flora that would nourish life beyond these waters, a natural resource so profoundly important and yet equally fragile that were it to disappear, so too would an entire ecosystem counting on the beavers and their series of dams. And despite their disruptive presence to the farmers, the world quite literally could not afford to lose that dam and the vital role that it played in regeneration and rebirth. Which reminds me of our paradox of truths, in which more than one reality can be true. It can be true that the very same thing as destructive as a beaver dam is the very same thing that can bring new life, new purpose, and new restoration to a world greatly in need. It can be true that an existing agricultural land lost to the floodwaters poses a significant loss for farmers, and it can be true that for the health, restoration, and regeneration of the whole world, these dams are necessary, and so is their disruption. And that, my friends, sounds a lot like Fountain Street Church to me. Pithy or trite as my metaphor might be, Fountain Street Church is a vital dam in this world, and we are being called, and we have the responsibility, and we are the entrusted ones of seeing to it that we are showing up when and where and how the world needs our care. We are quite literally being summoned at this moment to take time to challenge what has been historically acceptable in this church, and then ask ourselves what things might need to be casualties like those farms in the pursuit of an even higher purpose for the betterment of the world, like those ecosystems created by the beavers. This 153-year-old ministry has served as a dam and created a thriving series of ecosystems that still matter to this very day and this very moment in time we're sharing. And being part of the establishment of Planned Parenthood as well as the Choice Fund, an ecosystem of reproductive justice and access to reproductive services still thrives in West Michigan today. And the need for that ecosystem is only getting stronger. And supporting the creation of the local ACLU or our continued allyship with Black Lives Matters, an ecosystem of social justice, equity, and inclusion and anti-racism work is flourishing in Grand Rapids, and the need for that ecosystem is only getting stronger. In continuing to stand as a liberal institution of faith that challenges individuals to craft their own spiritual journeys, an ecosystem of liberal religion and inclusive spirituality prospers in West Michigan, and countless individuals attribute their liberation from oppressive Christianity to an upbringing or an experience in this very church we share. And the need for that ecosystem is only getting broader. This church, these people, this ministry that we share is a dam that needs to be restored, cared for, and nurtured, because like it or not, there are entire ecosystems in this world who are counting on us to ensure that they too can survive. Even if that means we have to surrender parts of ourselves in that pursuit. But that's what I'm committed to. I am committed to that kind of work with all of you. I'm committed to the grit and the sweat and the determination that evolution and the ancestors has called us towards. I'm committed to being a church that once and for all learns what it means to be in right relationship with one another, so that maybe this church can be in right relationship with the world, and maybe, just maybe, this world might find a way to be in right relationship with itself. I'm committed to working alongside you as we focus on the multitudes of truths that we share, and prayerfully and humbly discern together what it is that might finally need to be dismantled here at Fountain Street Church, so that we can eventually enter a new season of rebuilding what could be, but not a minute too soon or a second before we are ready to take that step. And mark my words when I assure you that we are not alone in this journey. Every church is facing this challenge. But then again, so is every educational system. So is an entire healthcare system. And every sector and industry in our world, unless we forget a political and government institution. All of these institutions that were built upon capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, and supremacy are finally at their moment of reckoning in a world in which it is being proven day after day that we as a human family were not created for these rigid, oppressive, and destructive structures. You and I in this 153-year-old ministry exist in a moment in time, which is the great reckoning that is finally upon us. And in this moment in time, we are being called to name exactly who we want to be and exactly where we want to go together. And then demonstrate that with our actions and our patterns and our lives and our church. We must demonstrate exactly what we are willing to do and where we are willing to go to satisfy that shared pursuit for the betterment of the world. And trust me when I say there is an entire world watching us. I've been in conversation, and will continue to be, with the Senior Minister Search Committee and our governing board about what all of this means. And you have my word, and you have my assurance that they too are committed to health, vitality, and communal flourishing in this world, and what that means for Fountain Street Church. That's 24 people, 9 on one committee and 15 on a board. 24 people who are committed to restoration and renewal, who wish to be change makers in this institution and dam builders for this world. And as a unified group of leadership, we are all committed to working together to focus on what truly is going to matter in this season. 24 individuals plus an entire church who have been charged with and committed to holding multiplicity, multitudes, and multiple truths all at once. And 24 individuals, an entire church, who will have our backs as we discern together which truths must be dismantled and let go of once and for all, and which truths are calling us into a future that the world needs for us to manifest. So for the love of all that is holy and true, my friends, please, please, don't let the distraction of calling me or anyone else as your senior minister distract you from the real work that's before us, because that won't change anything for this church, or at least it won't change the things that need to be changed. So, may we be courageous enough to enter brave spaces this year together. May we be resilient enough to mess up and keep messing up and messing up yet again and trying again. May we be open enough to collective liberation away from things that are no longer serving us. May we be bold enough to move towards collective transformation into a future that we need to be. And my friends, may we finally offer ourselves the chance to say no to a few things around here, so we can finally say yes to what the world truly needs from us right now. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I already made this joke to the search committee, but I'm sorry I didn't get like a glamour tear to roll down my cheek for that. I've cried plenty in the last 2 weeks, trust me. Well, I realized in the bulletin this morning that it's really weird to like now ask you for your money. But I've got to keep it awkward, I guess. So my friends, we are to the point in this time together where we surrender a bit more of ourselves through the collection of the offering. It's a way we embody our values in action. It is one of the ways in which I do believe we let go of ourselves and we actually surrender to wherever the world needs us. So, with the spirit of generosity and love, the offering will now most graciously be received.
Hello? Oh, good morning. It's always better if I just go in and play without saying anything, but because I didn't know what I was going to play when the bulletin was being written, I want to tell you now. I decided to make this a Duke Ellington Sunday, so the first piece you heard was Johnny Come Lately, if you were here for the first piece I played. This is his much, much better known piece called Come Sunday. And at the end, I'm going to play one that's probably no one has heard. It's very obscure. It's called Limbo Jazz. But anyway, this is Come Sunday.
Thank you, Robin. Friends, we have been called into this kind of pattern before. The reality is Fountain Street Church has 153 years worth of dams that have been created, ecosystems that have been regenerated and generated again, and so this is no different. I've had candid conversations with a few of you over the moments in this church's history where some things were surrendered for a higher purpose. At one time, this church baptized people in there. At one time, this church shared in communion together, held a different theology, held different social perspectives, and through the expansion of life and of being and maybe a dose of liberal religion, things change. I'm just asking us to reconsider that again. I want to offer us just a moment of silent prayer together. And in that space, hold the multitudes of truth. What are the multitudes of truth that live within you, within this world, within this church? And how are you being called to hold them with one another? Following our time of silence, you'll be called back with our closing hymn. Will you join me in silence? Does anybody remember these bad boys? These were a sermon illustration back in the winter on capacity, priorities, and hope. And if you were with us, you might recall that often in life or organizations or families or homes, we prioritize a lot of the minutia, a lot of things that just don't matter or at the very least don't serve us. And then occasionally we'll find a little more time to focus on slightly bigger things, but that's still a pretty big lift. And as the things that matter in life but take more focus finally come into existence, there's often not enough capacity to prioritize those things. And so, of course, we explored what it looks like to put the things that matter most in first. And if you were with us, you might remember that things settled and nested and they work, but only if we put those things that matter first. We are finally at that crossroads, my friends, where we need to decide what this is. If I may be so bold as to preach to you one more time, might I suggest that a few of these bigger stones might simply be that in this next year together, we should explore who we are. And not only explore who we are, but explore who one another is. One of my priorities this year is that we draw together in community in pursuit of joy, in pursuit of fun, in pursuit of intimacy and vulnerability, in the pursuit of just being a congregation, which we are. We have a lot of work to do together, and we should know one another in the pursuit of that. And so you'll be hearing next week, both at the potluck and through a guide we'll be passing out to you, all of the different ways from now until Christmas. I don't even like saying that out loud. All of the ways in which we're going to make points of connection for you. Sunday after church, evening activities, a couple forbidden hymn sings. Stay tuned. There's going to be a rich and fertile soil for that kind of priority. And in that, we can start focusing on the other big stuff too. As you go forward from this space, I hope you feel a sense of hope and connection with one another, because ultimately it is you who are Fountain Street Church. So thank you for being here. May you go in peace to know that the God of love is with you and within you. May you go in love to know that the Spirit of peace is also with you and within you. May you know those things this week, and thanks for being here.
God works in mysterious ways. As I said before, this is called limbo jazz, and the word limbo seems appropriate. Thank you.
Well, here we are, together again. It's so good to be with friends. See you next week at 11 a.m. Then we will be together again. It's been great to see you all in our church instead of a video call. God is great, so I'll pray that I will see you all in 7 more days. Come back next week at 11 a.m. so we can be together again.